pride of the country.
So, Rajiv Dogra, there is a pattern here. Attacks on the High Commissioner or consulates, attacks on Mahatma Gandhi's statue. There was even, I'm given to understand, the so-called Khalistan referendum in Canada. So, clearly, if the Canadians are not taking India's sovereignty and how important that is to us seriously, then India should reciprocate in the same coin.
Well, exactly. But before I answer your question, I'll go up regarding your leading statement that there seems to be a pattern. Indeed, there is a pattern. And I know it for a fact that ISI is guiding that pattern. Second, why is Canada the epicenter of all these misactions or atrocious actions? The referendum was planned at least 6 to 7 years in advance. It was supposed to be held in 2020, and it was started in Canada in 2022 only because of COVID. Otherwise, it would have happened a couple of years earlier, and the crescendo of the movement may have reached by now. So we are fortunate that way that nature intervened against them, because what they are doing is scornful. The second thing is that why is the government of Canada not condemning this or controlling this? When we see that Australian government, the British government had condemned the incidents which took place in their respective countries, and to some extent it has been controlled. Canada, it seems, is, especially Prime Minister Trudeau's party, is swayed by the fact that there are 24 MPs who claim to have some kind of a connection with these Khalistani people. So what should India do, A, against the people who are the perpetrators of this horrible incident, and B, against the Canadian government itself, so that it takes some kind of action against these people who are disturbing the peace of their own country, who are indulging in acts which are just short of terrorism.
That is exactly what India's problem is, Terry Milewski, that, Australia also saw similar scenes. There were attacks on public places, there were Khalistani slogans, temples were attacked, but the Australian government has taken visible action against these elements. People have been arrested, cases are going on, whereas in Canada it seems like there seems to be, I'm sorry I'm using these strong words, but it's almost like a free run for these elements. Tomorrow, if India were to host, let's say, a referendum on Quebec, will that go down well in Canada?
That's a painful point you've made for a Canadian, and it's a good one. The short answer to the question, how can this happen? Why does Canada allow it? Indian politicians have known for many years why Canada allows it. It's a simple matter that Canada has freedom of speech. This is the standard official answer from Canadian governments. Look, we don't like this, but we support the territorial integrity of India and the unity of India, but we have freedom of speech and we're not going to abolish that. Well, here's the problem. The reason why the Khalistanis get away with this, and this has been going on for decades now, this sort of glorification of terrorist violence. There's worse incidents than this in the past. Just mention the glorification of the Air India bomber, Talvinder Parmar, whose poster is life-size on the outside of an important Gurdwara in Surrey, British Columbia, the worst mass murderer in Canadian history, the author of the Flight 182 bombing in 1985, which killed a total of 331 completely innocent civilians. So it's been going on for decades. And the reason that it's been going on is because, yes, the Khalistanis have freedom of speech and we're not going to abolish that. But so do Canadian politicians, and they don't use it. They have freedom of speech to denounce this firmly, publicly, immediately. But they don't use that because they're afraid. Because they are, forgive me, I'm a Canadian, they're cowards. They're afraid that they will lose votes. Because this isn't just the Trudeau government. They happen to be in power now thanks to the support of the leftist New Democratic Party headed by Jagmeet Singh, who's a known sympathizer of the Khalistan movement, who, when I asked him in an interview to condemn the posters of Parmar, the Air India bomber, refused on 5 occasions to condemn and denounce.
No, but Mr.
those
Milewski,
posters.
you know, I don't buy this whole freedom of expression argument. What is the freedom of expression in showing, you know, a blood-stained puppet figure of the former Indian Prime Minister, puppet figures
no
of two of
violence
her
involved.
bodyguards shooting her? What is freedom of expression here? I mean, there's no freedom of expression here.
There is a difference between violence and freedom of speech. We don't lock people up in Canada for speech which we deplore, and that isn't going to change in any of the Western democracies. That you can ask this of the Australians or the Germans or the British. No, they do not criminalize speech, and that's not going to happen.
I'm sorry. What this is, and let's be very clear about it. I don't think this is freedom of speech. This is eulogizing an assassination of a sitting, at that time, a sitting head of government.
And we both...
You are valorizing an
believe.
assassination of a former prime minister. I'm sorry, there's no freedom of expression here.
But don't mistake me. I'm not saying that this is fine. Nobody is saying it. I have not come to say that it's fine because of freedom of speech. I'm saying that Indian politicians need to understand that they need to be more serious about persuading Canada to denounce and condemn this by using force, by using the diplomatic force of saying, if India is a rising power, you want free trade with India, you want access to the Indian market, forget it. We will not deal with any politician who will not publicly and explicitly and clearly condemn this kind of glorification
I'm sorry.
of violence.
I don't think this public condemnation is good enough. What needs to be done is the organizers of this tableau need to be arrested, because you are effectively like I said, eulogizing an assassination of a former Prime Minister of India. I mean, that's unacceptable. I firmly believe that has nothing to do with freedom of expression. I'm sorry. This is not freedom of expression. RPC.